name is Ioan Constantin. I'm a cybersecurity with Expert Romania. I'm a cybersecurity with Expert Romania. This is what 4 coffees does to you, to your ability to speak early in the AM. Some of you might know me. Others, please bear with patience. I'm going to give you a perspective, a brief perspective, I take it, because we're out of time, even before starting, on how we as a managed security services provider, Orange Business Services, have dealt with 2022 so far. Because 2022 has been a very, very rough year. And, ooh, this is actually a touch screen, I like it. Oh. I'm going to go through the context of 2022. I'm going to talk to you about some of the attacks, the attackers, and the targets. And, of course, I'm going to end with predictions, because any business presentation should have some type of prediction on the last slide, even though they never pan out, ever. So, for most managed security services providers, such as Orange Business Services, a common year, it's mostly like you have your ups, you have your downs, and of course, the in-betweens. You have some malware campaigns, and then you maybe have a period of silence where you regroup, when you learn some new TTPs, when you update your stuff, your processes, your knowledge. And then, of course, well, you might bump into another period of intense activity when it comes to attacks. This has been 2022 so far. It still is, unfortunately, a mix of all things that could have gone wrong, squared. So, for a run-of-the-mill, company that wants to have some sort of cybersecurity services offered by a third party, the process in itself should be transparent, should be pain-free, should be mostly click and go, should be a easy onboarding process, and then everything it's hands off. Not this year, because this year has brought a new context, something that we didn't actually have the chance to align with. And this is mostly because of the previous 2 years. You might remember COVID-19, that's still a thing, and it was during 2020 and 2021. And this post-pandemic context brought a very new and lush environment for attackers, for malicious actors and the like, to deal with. You had a lot of new technologies in the perimeter, because everyone had to move to their office in their homes. You had a lot of new tools, you had a lot of new software, you had a lot of new processes. Everything was ripe and ready to be, well, honestly, taken down. And then you have the new tools, because everything moves to a service perspective, right? Everything is service-oriented. Everything is more or less a service offering when it comes to malicious tools, right? You have ransomware as a service providers. You actually pay a monthly subscription in order to have access to a command and control center that allows you to exploit vulnerable assets using some type of malware, right? That is readily available within that platform. And then you have the ability to collect, your gains, your ransom, or to wipe everything off at the click of a button. This is scary, but it is a new reality. It is a new context that we have to grow accustomed to, and it is something that most managed security services providers have to deal with on the long term. And then, completely unexpected, you have the geopolitics. You have the West attacking the East, or actually responding to attacks from the East. You have state actors that, for the better part of the past 20 years or so, were not necessarily interested in Romania. It's not that they are now, It's not that something happened overnight and out of nowhere, Romania has become a ripe target for state actors from Iran or China. It's just that everything is cyber warfare now. Everything is attack and, well, for the better part of our services, defense. This has been 2022 in a nutshell, right, so far. Starting off with January, Log4j, I presume it rings a bell, right? Some of you might have spent some very, very late nights doing inventory and auditing assets in order to just get a glance, get a better understanding on what is the attack surface for Log4j in your enterprises. But that mostly died down by mid-spring, right? You automated the tools, you automated the response. To some extent, you've patched everything, you updated most of your stuff. We are now okay, right? And for Orange Business Services, Business Internet Security, managed detection and response types of services, we are definitely seeing a increase when it comes to the preventive and protective measures that have been taken regarding Log4j in our customers' base. And then you have DDoS, which, as you might see from those very nicely drawn circles there was a thing somewhere mid-April. The press was talking about DDoS attacks, mostly coming from Russia or from China, targeting some governmental infrastructure, targeting some private entities, but this is DDoS. It's unsophisticated. I know it hurts, but it's still unsophisticated. It's extremely, extremely low yield. It's just high noise, right? Malware was a constant and very, very tiring type of activity to deal with from an MSSP's perspective. We had malware campaigns ranging from mobile malware spread through SMS messages. We had, if I remember correctly, we had 2 such campaigns, and one was in the fourth quarter of 2021, followed shortly by another one in the beginning of 2022. And we've seen some other type of activity, which I'm going to go into early summer, in the early summer. And then you have fake news. You have disinformation. You have psyops. And the previous speaker actually did an amazing job of just pointing out how this type of human vulnerability can actually be exploited in a technical standpoint, right? You have fake news, and we still do deal with fake news, ranging from COVID-19 related stuff at the beginning of the year to more contextual and more topical things as of now. Some of you might remember that in the beginning of the spring, some of us received recruitment letters from various fake army officials in our area. That type of disinformation was initially spread to the internet. Going back to what we actually do and how we manage to observe these things, Orange Business Services is one of the largest MSSP in Romania. We do provide services for more than 400 companies, ranging from SMEs to large enterprises, although we are heavily vested to the large enterprises. We do protect tens of thousands of assets, and our services range from managed IPS and IDSs to security operations centers. We do have the capability to collect and then to analyze these breadcrumbs and translate the breadcrumbs into actual insights and intelligence. And this is some of the things that we've been seeing since the start of the year. An increase in ransomware and in DDoS. But DDoS was mostly on low-hanging fruits. I do remember that one time in April, one of the websites of an airport, of a Romanian airport, was taken down for nearly 2 hours by a DDoS attack. 2 hours. Can you imagine a website with maybe 4 visitors each year being taken down for 2 hours, for 2 entire hours? Well, so DDoS is mostly low-hanging fruits. DDoS is mostly noise and very, very low yield for attackers. But it has increased year over year since 2021, and it has, we did recognize some activity in our customers' infrastructures, right? And I think that the largest observed DDoS peaked at some 120 gigabytes per second. That's, I know it might sound scary, it actually isn't. The better part of these attacks, more than 90% of all observed attacks are opportunity attacks. They are not targeted. They are not sufficiently targeted, at least. They don't have a definitive goal in affecting one or another customer or entity. It's mostly everything that's visible and it's up for grabs. The attackers try to actually take it. Some 9% of the attacks are mostly targeted, and these are some persistent attacks, some more complex types of activities, and then 1% of everything that we have observed so far in 2022 are insider threats. And insider threats mostly relate to misconfigurations and people clicking the incorrect button or incorrect link in one of their applications. The malware that we've observed during this year, it's extremely diverse. And some of the names here might come as a surprise because it's kind of, a word for the most inconsistent lineup of malware ever. We've seen everything from Trojans and mobile malware to Zeus, right? Zeus, that thing is still alive, right? So, that back in 2021, I think, the Russian authorities, they said that they somehow managed to take down the people behind the Zeus botnet, but, well, actually that thing is still alive and kicking. The ransomware, mainly distributed out of Russia, that Conti is highly modular, but what we've observed is that for the better part of the detections, Conti was set as a wiper. They didn't even try to actually encrypt and then ask for money. They were just trying to wipe everything off. This is, right, again, a low level of sophistication when it comes to these types of attacks. Or actually, it might be an inability of the attacker to act upon that ransom. Because at least from starting with March 2022, it would have been very difficult for an entity in Europe to actually pay a ransom to someone in Russia, for example, or in China. And not because of the sanctions, but mostly because Bitcoin and every crypto was way down. The vectors, the attacks on the vectors themselves. Of course, phishing still reigns supreme with 6 out of 10 attacks being delivered this way. And it's mostly emails, but we did see an increase in 2022 over 2021 when it comes to social media. People are reacting more and more to private messages, direct messages over some type of platform, and then they follow through the links. But of course, it's phishing, it's topical phishing, so it's mostly related. It was in the beginning of 2022, it was related to COVID, but then, of course, topics changed from the war in Ukraine to inflation and gas prices and the broken down economy, whatever you may call it, some political maneuvering and political call to actions there. But this is, although this is still worrying, it does bring some type of diminished comfort when it comes to MSSPs, knowing that phishing in itself, it's something that can be partially mitigated and successfully mitigated, although partially, by education and awareness, right? So you don't have to build huge firewalls in front of it. You don't have to, I don't know, invest your CAPEX into some type of new fangled technology. You just have to insist in educating your users, right? And raising the awareness. Then, maybe less than 1% of each of the observed attacks was vectored to an exploit, to an active software exploit, right? That is, this is surprising, for me at least, and again, acts as an enforcement to what I've said earlier, that for the better part of the attacks, the attackers are mostly searching for an opportunity to gain access. They are not necessarily targeting one person or another, or one entity or another. And of course, a lot of noise, brute force, DDoS is all over the place. It has been constantly, it has become a run-of-the-mill type of title in the news cycle. Everyone is talking about, or at least they have been talking about DDoS from late spring to early summer 2022 as this thing that might cause you some minor discomfort, but we have to get accustomed to. Moving forward with with the vectors in itself, Cobalt Strike. Of course, everyone is using it, and well, we've seen a large range of beacons, like hack beacons in use all over the place, mostly starting with the third quarter of 2022, so in the second half of 2022, and they try to push anything and everything to those beacons, because once you have your strong foot in the stronghold, you can actually push everything to a Cobalt Strike beacon. Ransomware as a service. We've seen Revil. We've seen Revil actually in use in Romania. In Romania, as in the C2C was located in Romania. DDoS, again, the most notable operator, it's Killnet. Some of you might have heard of this group of, well, malicious actors coming from Russia. It has been a personal curiosity to observe these people from, like general public knowledge and whatever was readily available and some OSINT, in order to get a better understanding of not of their motivation, but what is it about their sophistication and their ability to actually inflict damage. They are extremely noisy with extremely low gains and low yield. I'm going to say it, and I'm going to say it very, very, in a very, I hope, concise way. Killnet is a joke. Moving forward to mobile attacks, large-scale campaigns through SMS mostly, at the end of 2021 and the beginning of 2022. Some 25% increase in the number of campaigns, and the surface of the campaign was actually worrisome. In February 2022, I remember that I was reading this report from DNSC, if I remember correctly, stating that up to 500,000 of users from Romania might have been targets of a SMS phishing campaign. All right? And then with ransomware, we have a mixed bag of incidents. It's mostly the high-profile victims are hit and miss. You might have heard, like in the news cycles, about some hospitals being taken off for some days, some 72 or 96 hours while they restore from backup. Some other entities actually boasting about the fact that they do keep all their information in written form. So a ransomware attack, like a disruptive attack to the availability of their infrastructure, is not such a big deal. This is the case in what we have been observing until now. Ransomware is one of the most, the most detected attacks, types of attacks in 2022, but the impact of ransomware in Romania is not as important as in other parts of the Western world, at least. By comparison, from public reports and again some OSINT, maybe some 2 to 3% of each of the victims of ransomware attack actually stand to lose either business critical or other types of important information during those attacks. I'm not saying that ransomware is not meant to be worrisome. It is, and I presume that most of the people in this audience know that ransomware is still one of the things that we have to deal with, and we'll probably have to deal with for the better part of the, of the foreseeable future. But the reality as we're seeing it in our customer infrastructure is that the impact is not sufficiently high in order to, have us either enforcing some types of very restrictive policies when it comes to using the assets or the internet connectivity, or in other means changing the way we provide our services. The attackers. You can, of course, gain a very high-level overview of some of the observables in Business Internet Security or MSSP provider from our Business Internet Security report. The 5th edition is readily available, and I think you can download it and I think you can browse it from the orange stand. I'm going to focus on these 4 countries. As you probably know, it's extremely difficult to pinpoint an attack when it hits your firewalls, right? VPSs are very inexpensive. Europe has large bandwidth when it comes to connectivity to Romania. So does China and the US. What we did here is that we went over some of the observables hitting our firewalls, and we tried to pinpoint some of the attackers, some of the APT groups that we know from either open source intelligence or some of our collected, insider collected threat intelligence from Orange Romania, we've known to be operating in either China, Russia, US, or as you will see in the next slide, in Iran. And unfortunately, we did see, and we are still witnessing some activity from some of the most, let me put it this way, some of the most important APT groups that we've been monitoring and observing for the past 2 or 3 years. So, and this year, the Russians, of course, they are the most visible. APT 28 and 29, they deal mostly in phishing attacks, and their goal is to exfiltrate data. Fortunately for our customers, they didn't get to do that. And again, Killnet, the very high noise group that has spun off to smaller groups such as No Name 057, and this is an APT group that should be monitored for the next, I don't know, half a year up to a year or so, because they are very, very active in the CIS states, and they are reaching and they are moving towards Eastern Europe. APT 27 and 41, these are the Chinese groups that we've been monitoring and targeting in our client infrastructure. Again, mostly phishing, the occasional ransomware here and then, but their principal goal is to exfiltrate data. They don't care that much about the type of data they are searching for. Everything that can be consumed is good to be exfiltrated. APT27, for example, they use spear phishing, so these are more sophisticated attacks, better targeting a given company or an individual, and they use something, they use malware such as quick pulse to deploy their advantages. And APT35, and this is, 2022 has been the first year that we monitored and we observed, we've observed the activity of this Iranian APT group, the newscaster group. They deal mostly in very complex social engineering operations. Their goals are actually multiple. They will probably be satisfied if they manage to wipe something or exfiltrate any type of data they can access. But this has been very interesting for us because, again, Romania is not usually, or let's say traditionally, a target of any kind of interest for Middle Eastern APT groups. And I'm talking about direct targeting, right? So spear phishing or even whaling. The too long didn't read of this slide and the previous slide is that while there is minimal APT activity across our monitoring surface, the attempts of exploitations, although are detected, they have very, very low yields, so they don't necessarily have a the expected outcome or impact of the APTs group. And the most observables are phishing artifacts and phishing attacks. The targets, of course, I'm not going to give a specific, and I'm not going to, mention like companies and enterprises that have been targets of the attacks that I mentioned before. It's interesting to see that healthcare and pharma have been the preeminent target of 2022. And this is again from our service provider infrastructure. With government and public services in second place, and this is mostly because of the large volumes of the DDoS attacks in April and May of 2022 against some government and public services websites mostly. Retail and transportation are last, and Bucharest has been the prime region for observing attacks. And again, this can be explained by the fact that most of the government and public services that have been targeted by attacks in 2022 are physically located in Bucharest. And what we do is that we can actually monitor for a wide range of attacks using the business internet security infrastructure, and then we can correlate the data with the geographical location of those entities, of those companies, and provide you with these very nice looking graphs. And again, predictions. And this is my, this is my final slide. Coming back to what I've said in the beginning, predictions are extremely hard to follow. It is mostly hit and miss because the context in itself might change, and the context actually has been changing very, very quickly in the past 12 months or so. But given the things that we've been seeing in 2022 and in 2021, and giving the very heavy context of geopolitical conflict, of post-COVID changes when it comes to the way we work, the way we travel, or the way we interact with each other, I can safely assume that 2022 is going to be extremely rough. There is probably going to be an increase in ICS targeting. So this is industrial control systems and IoT infrastructures, mostly because the attacks are probably going to manifest themselves through that red line between the IT and the operational, the OT side of those factories. And when it comes to IoT, it's ubiquitous. Everyone uses it. Everyone has some smart something in their homes. Most of us, at least, interact with those devices on a daily basis. This is a very, very ripe and a very interesting attack surface for any type of malicious actor. When it comes to adversarial stuff, AI, everyone has been mentioning AI as this game-changing, reality-altering type of technology that is going to bring either, I don't know, the destruction of the civilization as we know it, or the beginning of some new and bright era in human development. It's been neither of those. But it's not a buzzword anymore. It is becoming a reality, and it is being actively used for noise generation and obfuscation of other types of attacks, right? So you have AI that generates a lot of noise, a lot of traffic, a lot of interesting, seemingly interesting events in order to somehow obfuscate the real malicious activity that is happening in the background. And it is being used in order to derive new evasive techniques and to diversify the TTPs of the attackers. And last, and definitely not least, cyber warfare. The cat is out of the bag. 2022 has been the first year in at least my recollection when state actors have been publicly and actively attacking institutions in unfriendly countries without any type of political response. So seemingly without any type of coercion on the part of the victims. This is extremely dangerous. This is a playing ground full of landmines, because as soon as one state actor actively runs APT groups or I don't know, some type of government agency in order to attack infrastructure, public infrastructure of other countries, and the global political response is wait and see, this will most definitely open a very, very large door to everyone investing in cyber warfare. It's easier and it's less expensive than bombs and tanks. It's readily available, and the effects can be of grave importance. There is a huge bill of material at the disposal of these actors. Once you're becoming state-sponsored, there's not much that you ask for and you cannot get. Anything from bandwidth to access to exploits to 0 days to whatever days. These are some of the reasons that I think that, unfortunately, for 2023 and maybe for the next few years, cyber warfare is going to be one of the most present dangers when it comes to cybersecurity. I really hope I didn't scare you, and I really hope that I didn't bore you. There's no time for Q&A, but I am available for your questions in around at the orange stand or in the hallway. Thank you. Have a good one.